634, we're dealing with macholos hasuri mishum sakana, foods that are forbidden due to potential danger. And we're dealing with the issue of eating fish with milk. And the Shach, before we learn the Chidush Agos, just to remind ourselves, he says, "Who toes kiloniskar sham ela de dogim in bosser osrim from sakona." He says, of course, we've heard that there's a sakana, like we learned last week, to eat fish and meat, but we never heard that there's a problem with sakana eating fish with milk. And Jews every day do that. But remember, the Beis Yosef on the tour had said, so most of the Achronim didn't understand the Beis Yosef. So the Chidushei Agos ala tour, Rav Levi ben Chaviv, goes through this. Kol poskim, all the halachic decisors, Tam will Rav Beis Yosef bezeh. They wondered what was the Beis Yosef talking about there. Some people wanted to say that it's an editor's mistake. It's just a printer's error. However, the problem is Shema she'evi l'Rabbanan is karm l'tfus Rabbeinu Mechaber b'zeh hu mipnei she'em sovrim Shema she'kasav Rabbeinu Mechaber k'mo she'nichtav b'simin kuf ayin gimel. The reason why they think it's a printer's error, because the Beis Yosef had referred to what is dealt with in Shulchan Aruch Kuf Ayin Gimel, which refers to the danger of eating fish and meat. Hakavanah lomar shesham nizboyer de'ein lechol cholav in dogim mitnei sakana. But the lesser shtei kavanosu kach. It's not really that's a problem with dogim with cholav. Ela kavanosu lomar ein lechol dogim b'cholav mitnei sakana k'moshe omra rofim sheyesh b'zeh sakana tzoras. K'moshe nizbar b'orach chaim simin kufayim galot mitnei sakana ein lechol basar im dogim. Hu adinami cholav dogim sheyesh sakana b'chalasim al pi arofim shein lochlam yachad. So he does think that there was a danger as well to eat fish with milk, the same as the danger to eat fish with meat. So according to Maral Bach, the Beis Yosef did intend to write that eating fish with dairy is dangerous. And his reference to Siman 173 was simply to note that the same issue of danger was mentioned there concerning meat and fish. It is also noteworthy that Rabbeinu Bachai, in his commentary on Chumash, already mentioned that there's a danger inherent in eating dairy and fish together. So what the Tzurba M'Rabanan is trying to show us is that the tour, the Beis Yosef on the tour was not coming out of nowhere, that there was some precedent to this concept. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, v'chein das harofim, b'taruvis dagu gvinish nizbashu kechot shemoilid that it produces bad midos and leprosy. However, the Chassam Sofer suggests a proof from the Rambam for permitting fish and dairy. Says the Chassam Sofer, "L'fi is daiti, ze enu neman, ze enu emet, the neman aleinu Rambam gadol arofim, shlo hizkir isra zeh." He says the Rambam is the gadol shabarofim who never mentioned this problem. So the Shach also suggests a proof from the Gemara that dairy and fish are permitted. In that passage, Rava forbade fish cooked with meat to be eaten together with dairy due to the flavor of the meat. Thus, the fish is only forbidden with dairy because it was cooked with meat. But if the fish were cooked by itself with milk, it would be permitted to eat with dairy. However, one could respond that according to the Knesset Agdola mentioned above, the danger of eating fish with dairy may have only been discovered by the doctors during a later period, but in the time of the Gemara was not yet known. Some poskim, such as the Pischei Tshuva, permit eating fish and dairy together due to the principle of dashu bo rabim. That means if we see that multiple people have already done it and we see that they didn't get sick, that an actively practiced commonly without visible harm or damage is permitted. as Hashem evidently protects them. Nearly says the Pischei Tshuva Da'idna, Shekola Olam Mavashim Gam Im Cholav, that the whole world cooks fish with milk. Shari, the Kevin the Dashabor Rabim, it's okay. The bottom line halacha concerning this issue is that Ashkenazim are lenient in line with all of the poskim, like the Shach, the Ramah, right? We quoted the Ramah. No, we quoted the Prisha, who didn't accept the Beis Yosef. The Prisha's on the tour, and then the Shach, of course, who Ashkenazim follow. We don't have this prohibition. While the Yalkut Yosef, of course, that's Ovadia Yosef's son, who's pasking for the Sfardim, is going to be careful for the Beis Yosef, right? Rav Yosef Karo rules that Sfardim should be strict. Says the Yalkut Yosef. The Yotzei Ashkenaz, no agim lahakil bezeh, but Ashkenazi Jews are lenient. V'yesh le'am masha yismochu, and they have who to rely on. Unahara nara pashte. Each stream should follow its stream. The Rabbanut, or kashrus organizations that give hashgacha to restaurants that serve food with cheese, they need to make the customers aware. They should let this, they should know that we do that, so that those who are stringent should not eat pizza together with tuna or tuna casserole with cheese. The Ben Ish Chai said you should not fry your fish with butter if you're a Sephardi. Ben Ish Chai was a Sephardi. We Ashkenazim don't follow that. According to Rav Ovadia Yosef, he permitted to have fish with butter. I'm not sure why they made such a distinction. I mean, butter is a milk product, so why is cheese? There was some kind of sakana involved. I don't know of any danger to eat. I don't know if there's any medically proven danger regarding that issue. But on the other hand, we don't know that why there should be a danger to eat fish and meat, and we just accept that because of the reasons why we went through that last week, because it's a takana that we can't overrule really.
Uh-huh. Mm.
Okay, page 37. Another enactment instituted by Chachamim that is related to potential danger is mashkim megulim, exposed liquids, which refers to liquids. What's going on, Susan?
Somebody said that Trump just won Florida.
Oh, Trump just was given Florida. Okay, which refers to liquids that have been left uncovered and unattended for a short time. The Gemara in Chulin cites the Mishnah in Trumos, where this is mentioned, explains that the reason is due to concern that a snake may inject poison into the drink, and then discusses how long the liquids must be exposed for. Says the Mishnah in Masechlet Chulin, it's not awesome. Gimel mashke masur mishum gilui. 3 kinds of liquids, if you leave them uncovered, they will be prohibited. Mayim, yayin, v'chalav. Water, wine, milk. Kama yishu v'yu asurin. How long do they have to be out there uncovered for them to be prohibited? Kadesh yeitzei arachash b'makom karov v'yishteh. The amount of time that it would take for a snake to come out of its hiding place, drink, and then go back to its hiding place. V'kama makom karov. What's a close place? Amrav Yitzchak Braid Rav Yehuda, Kadesh yeitzei mitachas ozen kli v'yishteh. Even if it sort of came up, if it was hiding under the vessel itself or the handle of the vessel, and stick its head in and drink. So the Gemara says, what do you mean yishteh? So hakachazile, what do you mean? There's no suffix then. If you saw the snake drink it, then of course it would be prohibited. This is because normally we are prohibiting because of a suffix. That means it's got to be the time for the snake to drink and then to run back into its hiding place. And therefore, that's why you would not see it, because it's back into its hiding place. Now, the Beis Yosef discusses how much liquid must be exposed in order to be forbidden. Kamashir Amashkim Sheyesh Bahem Mishum Gilui. The Mishnah Sham Shir Amayim Amugulim Kadesh Ta'abid Bahem Hamra Kadesh Ta'abid Hamra. That means enough liquid where the poison would be diluted. Rabbi Yossi Yomer B'Kelim Kol Shein, any amount of water would be forbidden. Uvekarkos, in the ground, Arboim saw. Ushne Pirush because Rabbeinu Kasav Arif Arosh B'Perek Ein Mamidim. The Rif and the Rosh wrote this. V'nir Shem Aforshim Rabbi Yossi Leforish Divitanakama also, that when Rabbi Yossi said even Kol Shehu, that means even a little amount, he was explaining the Tanakama. Aval Rambam in Shmiras HaNefesh, Kosav Shir Hamayim She'asur Nizgalu, Kidei She'asam Nikr Behem, Umazik. You have to have fluid that small enough that you, number one, could recognize the poison, and enough where it would damage you. Avalim Hayu Hamayim Merubim. But if there was so much water that the venom would be diluted, so that would be permitted. So, unlike in Talmudic times and locales, there are many places in the world today where snakes are not found near human habitats. So the question is this decree still binding in these places? Tosfos, the Bali Tosfos, most of them lived in France and nearby parts of Europe, like northern Spain and some in Germany, suggests that although rabbinic enactments cannot normally be repealed, even if the reason is no longer applicable, in this case, uncovered liquids would be permitted, since the enactment was only instituted in places where snakes were common. They didn't make the takana for the whole world, for everybody. They made it for places where it was shchiach to have snakes. Says Tosfos Navodah Zarah, "V'anu she'en nechashim metzuyin beinenu." In our communities, there's no snakes. Ein lachush mishum gilui. So we don't have to worry about this. Ve'ein lomar de davar shebeminenu. We don't have to worry that. Go ahead. What? Saying what? We don't have to worry that this is a takana that was voted on. This is something we learned last week. That something that was voted by Sanhedrin, which is a davar b'minyan, a later generation cannot override that. So, ein lomar de davar shebeminenu v'tzarach minyan acher latir ki vadai hu kishas v'tchila lo asra el b'makom shel chashim mitzuyim. He says when they made the takana was only meant for places where snakes would be common. The Shulchan Aruch mentions the decree, but then adds that it's no longer applicable nowadays. Says Mashkim Shenizgalu Asrim Chachamim are Chachamim prohibited them. The Chayshinan Shemeshosa Nachash Mehem V'Yitil Bem Eres Va'achshav. But now She'ein Chashim Mitzuyim Beinenu Mutter. It's permitted because we don't have snakes. Rav Yosef Karo lived in Tzfat. I mean, he was born in Spain, but he lived in Tzfat. The Gra notes, quotes the explanation of Tosfos, mentioned above, as to how such a rabbinic decree could be ignored, and notes that there are cases as well, other cases, where the decree does not apply because there was no concern in such cases. Says the Gra V'Achshav, right? It's not, according to Tosfos, it was not something voted on, and the gzer was only b'makom diyesh mishum gilui, midi kamin and yan mevushel ein bo mishum gilui. But what about when they said that cooked wine, also there's no chashash of gilui? V'harbe kiyotzu sham, v'hu adin ledinan b'kulam, kevan shlo neser legamri kanal. So like when we said that Yain Mavushal, there's no concern of Gilui, so it follows the concept that they didn't make the Gzeira in places where there's no snakes. The Piskei Tshuva notes, though, that some Achronim were machmir about the halach of Mashkim Megulim, even in more recent times. Right? Says the Piskei Tshuva, V'achshav she'en achoshim ayin b'shla, shekosav d'mikol mokum shomer nafshe yirochik mizeh. Right? The shla, a lot of our Hasidic customs come from the shla. Rabbi Gruman once told me that to be a real Hasidic Rebbe, you need to know two people very well, the Maral and the Shla, because they were both hashkafic thinkers and writers. And so it's not surprising that the Shla would be concerned, possibly also some mystic issue regarding this, right? So he says that this issue, someone who is Shomer Nafsho should be worried about this. The Torah recorded all of this and didn't leave any of this out. He quotes the Groz well. He was careful about this harchaka. He says if you want to be machmir, you can be machmir and go look at the tour for all the things that he lists. In some places, even today, snakes can still occasionally be found near human residences. For example, snakes are sometimes seen in smaller communities in northern or southern Israel, though they are not common in major cities. The footnote says there are places in the United States as well where snake bites are more common, such as Texas and Florida. In addition, rapidly expanding cities where land that was formerly open or consisted of forests were then developed. There's been a higher proportion of snake bites in recent years. So would the halach of mashke and megulim apply in these places according to everyone, even those that are lenient nowadays since snakes are not common? So Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss in the Minchas Yitzchak, the Dayan Weiss, and cites a number of early Achronim who were strict in Eretz Yisrael. He appears to conclude that it is appropriate to be stringent today as well, at least in places where snakes are found. So the Minchas Yitzchak Abachaber b'Shulchan Aruch had tikla lachad divrei Tosfos Rashba. He brought the lenient opinions of the Tosfos and the Rashba that we don't have to worry about it. The action of she'nechashim mitzuyim and muta that today when snakes are not prevalent, it's permitted. Va'pri chodesh kosav da mechaber lo diber rak b'medinosenu. So in the Pri Chodesh noted, the mechaber is talking about Europe. Aber ba'artzas ha'ma'arav in Western places, if the snakes are prevalent, and in the surroundings, he says there's sometimes you find snakes, but he said people live in Eretz Yisrael should be worried. Min chashmul shekosov kuntus balchos gilui v'zocheni gam be'eishes achiti bezer some yos be'eretz Yisrael shamati as sham shenachash nashach leizanashim sham. He remembers that there were people who had snake bites in Israel. The Sefer HaKashrus confirms that in communities where snakes are sometimes seen, one must be machber, but clarifies based on Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul that only certain parts of the community would be subject to the prohibition, the ones that have the snakes. If you leave them uncovered day or night, if there are snakes there, or you're not allowed to drink them. Unless somebody was watching it. Right? The amount of time of being uncovered is very short to render it forbidden. He says this is a one-story house, or if it's an apartment house on the first floor, because there would be access to fields where snakes might be prevalent. But not if you're upstairs and you don't have to worry about snakes there. However, Rav Yezer Melamed in Pninei Halacha, writing for those who live in Israel, seems to accept that even in Israel, the halacha of not drinking uncovered liquids does not apply, presumably because snakes are not found in the same frequency as they once were. even in places where they are sometimes seen. Ulam kvar b'mei harishonim lo hayanu choshev mitzvim b'sfiros habatim. He says in the times of the Rishonim, right, the Balei Tosfos, the Shulchan Aruch, says that there were no snakes. V'hor harishonim shemutar lishtos mashkim shizgalu. And that's why those Rishonim, like Tosfos and Shulchan Aruch, said you're allowed to drink uncovered water. Because the prohibition was only where snakes came from. But if there's no more snakes, there's no isser. It's permitted to leave water uncovered. And you can drink them. The rakim, roim, befall, nachash. If you see in the neighborhood snakes, or sharminim, arsim, or other poisonous things like scorpions, if you see they're in the neighborhood and you have uncovered water, then you shouldn't drink it. Some have a minhag to make sure they cover fluids, mishum kovid le'isur shenigu chachamim, because of the covet of past prohibition. Shulai yesh potamim nosofim v'gamashken nikion, and because of cleanliness, so that insects won't go in. The Tzitz Eliezer was asked whether someone who's machmir not to drink from uncovered water may be lenient if the liquid is placed uncovered in the refrigerator or other closed areas. Right? That which was paskin Yoredeya are simin, kuf tet zayin, Seif Aleph, the mashkim shnizgalu asrum chachamim, umavur benos kelim the machmim gam bizman hazeh. Right? There's some people who say that you should be machmir today. The mat koven shel nizgalu ikpidu shnisharu gluyim below kisui. What about if they remained the afal pi shnimtza betoch aron shesokar chazak? What if it was uncovered in a closet, or b'makarer, or the refrigerator? Shlo yitachin sheichnos nachash. The snake's not going to go into a refrigerator. Afilu hachi gam kein oser. Mishum daklisha mashkin bo megulim. That's one sad. O dilma, or perhaps b'chai gavna sha'aron sogar b'makarer, b'kevan shein mitzios, she'avol sham nachash, afal pi shakli megula shari, b'kevan shenimtza b'makom sham, or adkan. So that was the question sent to Rav Eliezer Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer. Tzitz Eliezer passed away not too long ago. I think he wrote 18 or 19 volumes of Shilas and Shuvas, many of them on medical halacha. V'nei ledati, yishaper lomer b'chiyai gavna, he says, I think, correct, shenosim b'makar v'chadoma demutar afilo machmirim, b'mashkim shinizgal, that if you put an uncovered glass of water in the refrigerator, even to those that are machmir, not to drink of uncovered water, afilo zman hazeh, you would not be prohibited. Dizil basar time, you go after the reason. Shaber mutar b'chagoni dunenu, kishnatum makar v'adoim elazeh. Ure'ezed b'chupusai, he says, when I searched this, matzati b'sefer shmir saguf nefesh, the mitzad echad maybe sham b'shem agon ha'chazon ish, sheichmir mod b'mashkim shniskalu, ba'afilu gam al sofek ilui kidiyun sham, the Chazon Ish was very machmir on uncovered liquids. Umitzad sheni maybe comes up b'shmo, shekil, abal shapir bal kagon nidunenu, but he was makel if he was in a refrigerator. He says that was considered covered. Because if you like and he threw in his own opinion, not the Chazon Ish's opinion, that maybe the snake's not going in there because it's cold. However, he says, in any way, the nachash is not going to go there. He says he would permit, even not in a refrigerator, if you kept it in a closed closet. The snake's not going to go there. What about other prohibited foods? Foods placed underneath a bed. Another example of food forbidden due to danger is food or drink placed underneath a bed. That's mentioned by the Gemara in Psachim, Kuf Yud Beis. Tana, Oichlin umashkim tachas hamita, afilu mechupin b'chli barzel, even if they are covered with iron chests, ruach ra shur aleim, evil spirits are there. So this is not a matter of gilui. If you stick even a covered, even a food in a package, there's some problem with it. The Torah's Chaim explains that the reason is related to the fact that when one sleeps, it is considered as if one experiences a small portion of death. The Gemara says sleep is like 1/60 of death. Right? Hashem takes back our neshama at night and gives it back in the morning. That's why we say Moda Ani. That's why we have a Ruach Ra. That's why we wash our hands with the Tilas Yadayim in the morning to get the Ruach Ra off of our hands. One of the reasons. Also because our hands are askaniyos. Right? You are serving as an ohel, like a tent over this food. It's like tumas mace a little bit. And this evil spirit sort of sits on the food. The Rambam interprets the Gemara Psachim differently, based on Talmud Yerushalmi, which we know the Rambam in general did not hold by demons and shadim and ruach ra and all that. He says he links this case with the others that do not appear to be related to evil spirits, but to specific physical dangers. Dulola Mason Barnash Pritin Gupuma. A person should not put coins in his mouth. Vitavshila tuta arsa pisa, should not put a cooked food under his bed. Or tachos sheyichya mitze, or pita tachos shiche, or bread under his armpit. Or mitzah sakina gu pugla, he should not put a knife into a radish or into an etrog. The danger involved in the case of the bread in the armpit is that sweat was assumed to be poisonous and might contaminate the bread. In the case of the knife, the concern is that one may cut himself with the knife that is sticking out of the food. According to the Rambam, the Yerushalmi's concern is that something harmful may fall upon the food, and the bed referred to may be the type of couch used during meals, like on Pesach when we lean, like a couch. It's like a reclining chair. Where the Rambam says, "Lo yiten atav shel tachas hamita, afal pishu oisek b'suuda," even though he's eating, "Shemiyipol davar hamazik v'hueina roya." Maybe something dangerous fell on the food and you don't see it, and you're going to eat it like an insect. According to the Rambam, it would be permitted to eat the food if it were covered, since there would be no concern of anything falling into it. But the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with the approach that the prohibition relates to Ruach Ra, where we said where even if it's covered, it's a problem, right? Says the Shulchan Aruch in Ar Sumin Kuf Tet Zayin Lo Yitain Tavshil Lo Mashkim Tachas Hamita but they should Ruach Ra Shor Aleim. The Shach adds that according to the Shulchan Aruch, the food is forbidden even if it's covered or sealed. Says the Shach there Afilu Mechusim. What is the halach of the food or drink was placed underneath the bed despite the prohibition? It means you're prohibited. What if are you prohibited to eat the food? It says you may not place cooked food or drink underneath the bed. It doesn't say you can't eat it. So what is the halach of food or drink was placed underneath the bed? Since the Shulchan Aruch only states that one is not allowed to do so, does it imply that if it were done anyways, it is permitted to consume? So Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank in the Har Tzvi, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank passed away, I think in the early 60s or maybe early 70s, was a major posek at the time that the state of Israel was created. And a lot of the halachas in the tzava and how to do hydroelectric dams and all the various modern shilas that the Israeli society needed was resolved by Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. He was somebody still in those days accepted by all streams, both the religious Zionists, the Haredi community. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank was one of the Gedolim for everybody.
I met him in 1960. I personally met him, Tzvi Pesach Frank.
In Yerushalayim, right?
In Yerushalayim. I was a bacher at Yeshiva, and I went to him ask a shaila whether I should keep 2 days or 1 day, because he says to me, you only have to keep 1 day because you're single. You may end up marrying a girl in Israel, and you're saying, so you don't have to keep 2 days. But
he was the posek. He was like Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in his day. He was the posek ador.
He was.
No question about it. And he dealt with all the modern shilas, all of them.
Right.
He didn't.
Right.
He was really. And so the Hart Tzvi says that this issue is a machlokas achronim. Says b'shvus Yaakov she'en b'zeh rak hazor lechatchila, but the evidence ain't chash iser. Says but the evidence if you did it you can eat it. V'skimu imo other achronim agreed. Omnam das hagra mashma she'ochel mashkim she'nichat tachzamid gab the evidence lochlam. But he quotes the Gra, pretty heavy hitter, who says that food underneath the bed you wouldn't be able to eat. Rav Ovadia Yosef rules that the chatchila one should be machmir even after the fact and not eat them. But if it will cause a major loss, hefsid meruba, one may rely on the lenient opinions. Says the Abia Omer, if there's no big financial loss, you should be machmir. Because the gra was machmir. The Abinyan Oilam, Vachido, Rav Zivchei Tzedek, Rav Ben Ishchai, Rav Mitzrayim, Rav Labam, V'Shut Hadar, V'Keren LeDavid. By the way, this is very typical of Rav Ovadia Yosef. He was encyclopedic. He knew every shilas and shuvas, and he listed all of them. So he listed all of the poskim that were machmir. Shekulam choshim b'zav b'diavad l'ruach ra. Ulam behefsid meruba efshar lohiris la'akel. He says you someone could paskin la'akel, and he brings you k'moshe kosav ashvus Yaakov v'agoin Shem Aryeh v'agoin Rav Yitzchak Elchanan. Rav Goin Yitzchak Elchanan refers to Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, right? The Yeshiva University is called Yeshivas Rav Yitzchak Elchanan. So Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector was one of the major poskim in the 1890s in Europe. Vagon Be Shlomo, V'Shut V'Yeter Yitzchak V'Chanin D'Chai V'Yalkut HaGershuni V'Olas Yitzchak, and V'Harabin HaMachaber Shut Bin Yenoilam Vagon Malbim B'Artzis HaChayim V'Od. And you can rely on the Rambam who says there is no Ruach Ra, whatever Ruach Ra means today. So you can rely on the Rambam and all these other poskim if there's financial loss. Let's say you're in a hotel and you're traveling and you had bought a whole bunch of food, and somehow you kept your suitcase under the bed. I mean, I'm just thinking, it could be a lemaisa shaila for somebody. Then they go home and they realize, I had all this food under the bed. Then this is this issue. So if they have sid meruba, maybe you could rely to eat it. And you could also raw foods. You could be lenient. The nearest shekenaya moira uvagon Rav Shimshon Ara Polanski la'akel b'zeh. It says if there's no financial loss, we should be stringent. If there's no other reason to be makel. But you should wash it 3 times. Now, if someone had not slept on the bed while the food was there, then you can be matir. It's only if you slept on the bed. The Yalkut Yosef suggests a different leniency, that if the floor is tiled, like most floors today, one may be lenient b'diavad and eat the food even when the loss is minimal. You shouldn't put food under bed. So Rabo Amatirim ala Oisrim, there are more lenient people that prohibit. The Kol Shekeni Ma'isa Karka Shetachas Amitim Rutzevas Bavonim of Bakors of Eitzim. If it's wood, if the floor is wood, or beams, or made out of stone, Yesh Lahater B'Diavad Vafilu B'Efsid Mup. Ruach Ra is only present on actual ground with earth, but not on tiled floors. So l'chora, it's a gather in the Ruach Ra. So if you have wooden floors or tiled floors, it's not a problem, according to the Yalkut Yosef. And Rav Vosner, right, the Shevet HaLevi, Mikol Malcolm Harbe Poskim Aviu Divrei Shvus Yaakov Lalacha. Umashakazav V'darchei Tshuva Kasher Hetik Divrei Torah Chaim Shatorah Chaim Ayri Linyan Esra Michael Eino Nachon Torah Chaim Lo Yizker Klal Loshen Yisra Michael. He says it's wrong. He never asked her to do Varm Eila Dover Noita Shebzman Ezeh Shamim Lakel. He says today you can be lenient. Additional opinions can be found in the Sefer HaKashrus, including Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul, who are machmir not to eat it. The Chayot and Mishnah Berurah, who rule leniently concerning foods with a question of Ruach Ra generally. Like, let's say you touch food before washing the Netilas Yadayim in the morning, which is also based on Ruach Ra. So they are lenient on those cases. And the Das Torah was lenient that the food was placed only when one places his head on the bed. So if the food is under your head, it's a problem. But otherwise, it's not a problem. The P'nei Halacha, right, Rabbi Eliezer Melamed is also lenient and quotes one opinion holds that one need not be careful about the Isser even lechatchila. He brings Rav Tzadok of Lublin. What about leaving peeled eggs, onions, and garlic out overnight? Another category of food mentioned by the Gemara Nida as causing danger when eaten include peeled eggs, onions, and garlic that were left out overnight. There are 5 things that if you do these 5 things, you are responsible for your own death. They're dangerous. You eat a peeled garlic, ubatsel koluf, or peeled onion, ubeitza klufa, or peeled egg, mashkin mizugin, or you poured liquids that were left overnight. So if you sleep in a cemetery, or you cut your fingernails and you throw them into a public place, or so you bloodlet and you have engage in sexual activity afterwards. These are dangerous things. So from the continuation of the Gemara, it seems that this warning applies even if they were covered, but does not apply if one left the peel or the root on. Says the Gemara, even if they're placed in the basket or they were sealed, ruach ra shayra land. There's still going to be a problem with ruach ra. But that's only going to be a problem if you didn't leave the peel on. But if you left them with the peel, then it's not a problem. Rashi explains that in order to avoid the danger, even leaving some of the hairs on the top of the onion is sufficient. Thus, leaving on the peel or some hairs will not render the food forbidden by an onion or a garlic or even an egg. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't even cite this passage as halacha, but many later achronim, such as the Shulchan Aruch Harav, Lubavitcher, do accept it as the halacha. Lo yochal shum koluf, or basal koluf, or beitza klufa she'over lemalayla. You shouldn't eat a peeled garlic or peeled onion or peeled egg that's left overnight. They shuruach rashar lamb. Afilim surim bebeget, even if they're covered in a cloth. The chatumim and sealed. The mshayir ben ikram. But if you left a peel on it, or the hair on top of garlic or the onion on ma'at then mutar. Then they're permitted. Another suggestion of Rabbi Vadia Yosef is to mix the garlic or onion into other foods. Don't leave these things unpeeled overnight. You made kahaktis tzribel, right? You made eggs and onions, and you chopped them up with if you mix the garlic and the onion with other foods, could go on salat, or some kind of salad, or masa kedera v'tigun that you're going to fry. Shadei teruva saying that if you're going to mix it up, then ein lachush. But they're not chopped; they're sealed when you buy them. Unpeeled garlic and onion from a market.
And eggs, we always
Unpeeled from a market. They sell unpeeled eggs.
no unpeeled chopped onions you can buy. I did that.
Yeah, but you can have them in the refrigerator though. That's not a, that
No,
would
but
not.
no, Susie is saying if a market sells chopped onion Well, if it's overnight, I don't know. It seems to be, that would be a problem. Let's see. The Yalkut Yosef is lenient as well for canned foods that contain onion.
So here, premium peeled garlic
Yeah, but that's, oh,
with an OU.
look, Susie is showing me premium peeled garlic in a package
An OU.
with an OU.
They also sell chopped onions.
Can you buy chopped onions like this too?
Yeah, fine chopped minced onions. You can buy them in a package. But also,
Yeah, but
they
if you
also sell
leave a little,
eggs.
do they leave a little bit of the peel on this?
No.
Our eggs for Pesach, we crack everything and we put them in the fridge and bins. We never.
Yeah, but remember, that's not, so remember we learned tonight that by uncovered water, if you put it in the refrigerator, it's considered as if it's covered. Susie's asking that when we peel eggs and then you put them in the refrigerator overnight, is that going to violate this? So I wanted to say, well, just like we said by the overnight water, someone gave a leniency that it was the Tzitz Eliezer who said putting in a refrigerator is considered that it's closed.
But the big rabbis don't call it. He said,
Right. And here it also said,
that's like a video of it.
here the way that they said you should avoid the problems, just leave some of the hairs on the, leave some of the peel on.
Here, and they sell peeled eggs in the market with an OU. But it's packaged, it's not raw, it's not open.
But it has an extra OU, obviously the rabbis.
It says, even if they're tied up with a piece of clothing and sealed, it means even the Shulchan Aruch Harav said, afilu hem tzurim bebeged v'chatumim. Means even if they're sealed and closed up, the Ruach Ra is a problem. So it's a shaila that we have to ask. We'll send an email to Rabbi Sauer and to Menachem Genak at the OU. I think it's a good question. Let's see further. So the Yalkut Yosef is lenient for canned foods. Shimur b'tzom Menachem b'kufsos. If you have onions in a can, shimurim skurim, yesh lakelav shavar alayla, even overnight. Shein ruim lachila. They're not, you can't eat them if they're dried like that. But near the kvushim pickled, the mayim ein lahakel rak b'di'evet. You cannot be lenient for pickled onions and water. Kvusham achashum lachila b'tzarchiyun. However, listen to this: the Pnei Halacha, Rabbi Eliezer Melamed rules that there's no reason to be strict about this issue, since today we are generally not concerned with these types of things. Yesh noagim sh'olach ol shum kolofu batzel kolofu beitza klufa shavar leim alayla. Even if they're closed in a kli, or tzurim b'sakid, or they're closed in a bag. So this is a problem, right? That's the problem we have. Ulam rabim einam noagim lachush lezeh. Says the majority of people, we're not lachush. Mitnei shazarzu, we don't worry about it. Mitnei shazarzu lo nifsek halacha b'Rambam u'v'rav Sefer Rishonim Shulchan Aruch. It was not passed in halacha by the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. So maybe since it was quoted in the Gemara at the time of the Tanoim, the Ruach Ra could do damage. We don't have it anymore. We should leave halachas that have no shoresh. The time of if we don't know the danger in our time, we should leave it alone. If you have a family minig, and mistakenly left them overnight, he can throw it out and not be worried about Bal Tashchis. Rav Melamed cites many achronim who were not strict about this, including the Yamshel Shlomo, the Tiferes Tzvi, the Yaskil Avdi, the Aderet. The Aderet was the father-in-law of Rav Kook. And the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Wosner, and the Tzitz Eliezer are inclined to rule this as well. So we have plenty of major achronim that obviously that's what the OU is relying on. Okay. I would like to start page 55. halachic perspectives on the coronavirus, which is a segue from the issue here of sakana. We've been dealing with sakana foods. So now we have a sakana of a plague. And I think we're going to learn some very interesting, we've had some of us have listened to other shiurim about the corona, but here we're going to see some fundamental sources about that we may not have learned before about how the halachic authorities dealt with epidemics. In the previous year, we examined some of the halachos of sakana, many of which are mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch and Siman 116 of Your Day, which we've just finished. Another case of sakana is mentioned in the Ramah there, that has unfortunately become extremely relevant across the globe over the past few months, the danger of dever, a plague or epidemic. Since the pandemic of COVID-19, known also as the coronavirus, has significantly impacted all of our lives during this lifetime, we felt it fitting to devote an entire shiur to the subject. In this shiur, we will survey some of the relevant sources of halachic responses to plagues over history and discuss briefly how they apply to our current situation. In addition, we hope to discuss some of the halachot related to davening alone, without a minyan, in a second installment to be distributed later, as this has become the norm in many places during this period, given the temporary mass closing of shuls and batei midrash all over the world. So let's quote what to do when plague strikes. We will begin by quoting the Ramah, mentioned above, which is in Seif 5 of Siman 116, which we've just been learning. The same halacha of food placed underneath the bed that we just learned. The Ramah first presents a general warning to avoid dangerous activities or places, and then proceeds to offer a number of examples of this principle, including dever. People should stay away from anything that's dangerous. Ki sakanta chamira misura. Danger is, you have to be more strict about danger than prohibition. V'yesh lachish yoser l'safek sakana min l'safek isur. We have to be more stringent about safek danger than safek isur. Od kasvu sheyesh livrach min ha'ir keshedever be'ir. The earlier authorities said that when there's a plague in the city, you should run away from the city. V'yesh lotzeis min ha'ir betchilas hadever. And you should leave immediately. Don't wait till the middle or the end, but leave immediately. V'lo b'sofo. V'chol elu advarim mishum sakana. V'shomer nafsho yirachik mehem kayotze b'zeh. Somebody who guards his soul should stay away from danger. According to Ramah, who's quoting the tshuva of the Maril, the proper response to the presence of an epidemic in one city is to flee due to the danger. The Maril also offers two additional reasons for fleeing. The first is that even if there is a heavenly decree against a certain location, perhaps if one flees elsewhere, one can escape the divine decree. The second is that those that remain may panic significantly, which is also extremely unhealthy. Right? The simplest reason for fleeing is that it is dangerous to remain due to the significant chance that one will become infected with the disease. And the best manner of avoiding the disease is to flee to the disease. Now, what they didn't understand is a situation where the whole world has the same disease, so there's nowhere to flee to. The Kaf HaChaim adds to this that fleeing is the proper course of action because dever is highly contagious. And he notes that the Arizal already cautioned against even handling the belongings or clothing of one who is ill, because it could infect the person, considerations that are relevant for preventing the spread of the coronavirus as well. Of course, we don't know how long the viruses can last on surfaces. Again, let's just put everything in context. The Ramah is late 1500s, early 1600s. The Kaf HaChaim is mid-1800s in Baghdad. The Arizal lived in Tzfat in 1500s. Okay, says the Kaf HaChaim, sheyesh livrach min ha'ir keshedever be'ir, lefishu choli hamidabek. Dever refers to an infectious illness, an illness that spreads. Kemoshe kasuv yidbak Hashem b'cha esa dever. This is in the Tochacha. So devek means glue or stick. So when it says the dever will stick to you because it's spreading from stick to stick to stick. Afilu ba'ota shchuna she'omid sham hamuke, or afilu eza kli u'malbo shelo. Like, let's say there's a neighborhood where there's a sick person there, or a kli that he used, or clothing. So you should stay away from it. De lo lutzak. They didn't know Louis Pasteur was 1875, who developed the theory of infectious disease, along with Robert Koch's postulates. You're talking about 1870, 1880, where they first isolated tubercle bacillus and understood the reason of tuberculosis and that cholera and all these things were caused by infectious disease. They already knew, they didn't know really exactly what caused it, but they knew that when there was a bubonic plague or when there was cholera, that one person got sick and another person, then all of a sudden everybody got sick. So they didn't know the mechanism for it, but they knew the results, that sometimes sickness went through a community without really understanding why or how it worked. But the facts of it, they understood. So this is instruction of fleeing was certainly a logical one during earlier times in history. The problem is that it appears to conflict with a passage in the Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara states that when one encounters Dever in one city, one should remain at home. Torah Rabbanon, Dever be'ir, kanes raglecha. Gather your feet and stay at home. Shenemar vatem lo tetzu ish mi pesach beiso ad boker. Right? V'omer Yeshayahu, lechi mi bo b'chadarecha. Go to your house, to your room, uskord lasecha, close your door, badecha. V'omer, mechutz teshakel cherev u'mechadarim eimah. That means if outside it's raging, you stay in your house. Now, my v'omer, why do we need all these extra limudim? Because maybe you would have thought only at night, but not in the day. That's why I was given sources day and night. Ton Rabbanon, Dever be'ir, if there's an epidemic, don't walk in the road. The Malach HaMavis is there. The Kivan Diavile Rishus say, the Malach HaMavis is given Rishus to take people's souls to stay away from their Mazgila day. Don't go with him. Shalom be'ir, if there's peace in the city, don't walk on the side streets. The Kivan Diles Le Rishusa Mechabe Chavu Mazgi. The angel of death doesn't have permission to kill within the city, so he hides and walks on the side of the road. So according to the Gemara, it seems that the appropriate response to an epidemic is not to venture outside, both at night and during the day. In addition, if one does not need to be outside, one should not walk on the main thoroughfares. So how do the Maril and Ramah reconcile this with their ruling to flee the city? The first response is that one must evaluate the medical reality of every situation based on the facts on the ground, and not simply based on comments in the Gemara, as every situation may be different. Since Chazal's primary goal is to offer spiritual guidance and inspiration, if at times we see that the medically or scientific advice of the doctors differ, one should follow the advice given at that time. The Sri Ragoram states that Chazal were our sages, not our doctors. Now, this is a controversial point that the Tzurba is bringing, because some believe the various things that are mentioned in the Gemaras. The Rambam says not to practice all those. So this is the debate between Rav Slifkin. He was attacked many times by various people because of this issue. But we see that the Rav Shira Gurin said that in Otzar HaGaonim that Chazal were our sages, not our doctors. And therefore we should follow the given advice of the doctors at the time. Thus, if it was accepted in time of the Ramah that the safest method of avoiding an epidemic was to flee the city, then that was the correct approach at that time. But aside from this general consideration, the commentaries do in fact address this question of the machlokes between should you flee or should you stay in the home. The Marshal suggests that indeed it's preferable to flee, but so long as one does not flee, one should remain in one's home. Nir lomar delo ba lomar la fuke shelo yifazer raglo. Doesn't say by staying in your home you should not flee. The Efshar lomar kain the vada bedever beir nami tu lefazer raglo v'lumalei v'amashar. Better to run away. Al dachi pirush kol zman sheinu mefazer raglo b'na'ir. As long as he hasn't been able to run away, you cut his raglo v'veisav v'lo yetzer b'chavos. He should stay in his house and not go out in the street. The Maril also holds that it's preferable to flee, but he explains that the Gemara refers to a case where one did not flee at the outset of the epidemic. In a case where the epidemic has taken hold across the city, it's preferable to remain at home, as venturing outside may prove to be more dangerous, as one may likely contract the illness this way.
It's interesting, Ernie, that while this is interesting about fleeing, when you're dealing with a coronavirus, a global pandemic, there's nowhere to go.
So good point, Chaim. We're gonna stop today here, but this gives us a little taste of where we're going. We're learning the fundamental sources. Chaim's question will be addressed because if there's nowhere to flee, it looks like the recommendations to stay home were the appropriate recommendations, even halachically. That's what's going to come out. Okay, so the Daf Yomi will start shortly. And Mir Hashem,